Oh, you want to play psycho killer? Can I be the helpless victim?
Cross your eyes and scream, man. Scream for your life.
Welcome, Scrape Things. I'm Jenica Olin. This is my 29th episode, and we are exploring momsters in May. Moms in horror. In today's episode, our momster is a grieving mother whose love for her child curdled into vengeance after an unimaginable loss. Blinded by pain, she sees violence as justice and protection. Beneath her calm, maternal exterior lies a fury that cannot be reasoned with, only survive. Her delusion becomes a vessel, allowing his presence to linger longer after death, blurring the lines between memory and manifestation. If you're new here, each episode will have an intro, brief synopsis of the movie, an analysis of the film, and then I get into the true horrors of it all. I'm a huge true crime fan, and I like to make connections between the true horrors that inspire our darkest imagination. The truth is, the stuff on screen is way tamer than the true horrors that take place every day. Spoiler alert, I've made it my job to spoil the shit out of this movie. Today, I'll be covering the 1980 Friday the 13th, directed by Sean Cunningham and written by Victor Miller and Ron Kurz, starring Betsy Palmer, Adrienne King, and Janine Taylor. The estimated budget for this movie was $550,000, and the estimated gross was $39 million worldwide. The tagline for this film: on Friday the 13th, they begin to die horribly, one by one. Some quick trivia about this film. The movie was filmed in Camp Nobi Bosco in Blairstown, New Jersey. It is a Boy Scout camp that is still in operation, and it has a wall of Friday the 13th memorabilia to honor that the movie was set there. I'm sure it's not cheap to get into that camp at all. Betsy Palmer said that if it were not for the fact that she was in a desperate need for a new car, she would have never accepted the role of Pamela Voorhees. In fact, after she read the script, she called the movie a piece of shit. Over the years, however, Palmer did warm up to the film, as it made her more famous than infamous, and made appearances at conventions and in documentaries to discuss it. Victor Miller admitted that he was purposely writing the success of John Carpenter's Halloween. Director Sean Cunningham even approached Halloween producer Erwin Yablans to produce the film, but he declined as he was interested in doing another horror movie. The body count in this movie is 11, including the real death of a real snake. Miss Voorhees explains at the end about how her killing spree came on the anniversary of her dead boy's birthday. She never specifies the date. They almost forget to even mention Friday the 13th at all until Sean Cunningham told Victor Miller that they can't call it Friday the 13th, as cool as a title as it may be, without at least one reference to the day in the actual script. Let's set the scene with a synopsis of the movie.
Friday the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday the 13th.
In a brief prologue set in 1958, two summer camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake sneak away from a campfire sing-along to have sex. Before they can completely undress, an unseen assailant sneaks into the room and murders them both. The film moves forward to present day, Friday the 13th. A young woman named Annie enters a small diner and asks for directions to Camp Crystal Lake, much to the shock of the restaurant's patrons and staff. A strange old man named Ralph reacts to the news of the camp's reopening by warning Annie that they are all doomed. A friendly truck driver from the diner agrees to give Annie a lift halfway to the camp. During the drive, he warns her about the camp, informing her that a young boy drowned in Crystal Lake in 1957, 1 year before the double murders occurred. After he let her out, Annie walks on. A little later, Annie hitches a ride and gets picked up by an unseen driver in a Jeep. As the driver speeds past the entrance to the camp, Annie becomes concerned and leaps from the moving vehicle when the driver fails to stop, fleeing into the woods. The unseen driver chases her into the woods and slits her throat. At the camp, the other counselors, Ned, Jack, Bill, Marcy, Alice, and Brenda, are refurbishing the cabins and facilities, along with the camp's demanding owner, Steve Christie. They have a few strange incidents, including a prank where one of them pretends to drown, and an unwelcome visit from a local police. They find a large snake in one of the cabins, chopping it in half with a machete. They also receive a visit from Ralph, who again warns them that they are all doomed. As a violent storm closes in on the horizon, Steve leaves the campground to get more supplies. Meanwhile, the unidentified killer begins to isolate and murder the counselors one by one. Ned spots the killer walking into a cabin. Nick follows the person into the cabin. As the violent rainstorm hits the camp, Marcy and Jack later enter the cabin and have sex in one of the bunks, unaware that Ned's dead body is in the upper berth. Afterwards, Marcy leaves to visit the ladies' bathroom, and Jack is attacked by the killer, who's lying in wait underneath the cot. The murderer drives an arrow up through the bed, and it pierces Jack's throat, killing him. While using the bathroom, Marcy hears a noise by the shower. Thinking it's Jack playing a joke on her, she goes and pulls back a shower curtain. Finding nothing, she turns around and finds the unseen killer wielding an axe and gets it slammed in her face. Bill, Alice, and Brenda play strip Monopoly in Alice's cabin until the rain makes Brenda remember she left her cabin and windows open. As Brenda settles down to bed, she hears a faint childlike voice calling, "Help me," from the woods. Brenda walks outside with a flashlight in the pouring rain, trying to locate where the child's voice is coming from. She ventures to the archery range, where the hooded killer turns on the blinding light at the range, distracting Brenda, who is killed off-screen. Hearing her scream, Bill and Alice go to investigate, but only find the bloody axe. After looking around the camp, they find nobody and begin to suspect that something is up. Attempting to call the police, they discover the phone lines have been cut, and that the cars won't start when they try to leave. Meanwhile, Steve is in town having dinner at the local diner. When Steve arrives at the entrance of the camp, he is also murdered, apparently familiar with his attacker. When the lights go out all over the camp, Bill goes to check on the power generator, but doesn't know how to operate it or figure out what's wrong. When Bill doesn't return, Alice heads out to the generator cabin looking for him, and she finds his body pinned to the door with several arrows. Now alone, Alice flees back to the main cabin and hides. After a moment of silence, Brenda's corpse is hurled through a window. Alice hears a vehicle outside the cabin, and thinking it to be Steve, she runs out to warn him. Instead, she finds a middle-aged woman who introduces herself as Miss Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies. Alice hysterically tries to tell her about the murderers.
How are you? Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. No. Dear, now, look, I can't help you if you don't calm down, please.
Miss Voorhees expresses horror at the sight of Brenda's body, but she soon reveals herself to be the mother of the boy who drowned in the lake in 1957. Talking mostly to herself, she blames her son Jason's drowning on the fact that two counselors were having sex and were unaware of Jason struggling in the lake. She tells Alice that today happens to be Jason's birthday. Miss Voorhees suddenly turns violent and pulls out her Bowie knife, rushing at Alice, but Alice uses a fireplace poker. A lengthy chase ensues, during which Alice flees her attacker and finds Steve's and Annie's bodies in the process, while speaking to herself in Jason's voice. She corners Alice in a storage shed, where Alice has found the rifle. Before Alice can load it, Miss Voorhees attacks her and slaps her around. Alice escapes and runs back to the main cabin, hiding behind the locked door in a pantry. Miss Voorhees, now brandishing a machete, breaks the door open and rushes in at Alice. Alice hits her on the side of the head with a frying pan, rendering her unconscious and believing her dead. Heading out to the side of the lake, Alice sits down next to the water, but Miss Voorhees comes rushing out to her again with a machete. Besting her attacker, Alice gains the upper hand and finally kills Miss Voorhees by decapitating her. Now in shock, Alice gets in a canoe and rows out to the middle of the lake where she falls asleep. Morning comes, and Alice is asleep in the canoe. Police arrive and call out to her. As she sits up in the canoe, the decomposing body of Jason attacks Alice and pulls her out of the canoe. Just as she is dragged underwater, she wakes up in a hospital where a police officer tells her that they pulled her out of the lake and that everyone at the camp is dead. When she asks about Jason, the officer informs her that they never found any boy. Alice replies, "Then he's still there," and shows the lake at peace.
Are they all dead?
Yes, ma'am. 2 of my men pulled you out of the lake. We thought you were dead, too. Do you remember very much?
The boy. Is he dead too?
Who?
The boy, Jason.
Jason?
In the lake, the one who attacked me, the one who pulled me underneath the water.
Ma'am, we didn't find any boy.
Then he's still there.
Now it's time to talk horror, and my guest today is Neil. He is a longtime friend, and he also does audio stuff, but he's going to downplay that. He's helped me a lot with this podcast and getting my audio in check. I will say that. So thank you, Neil. So we are talking about Friday the 13th with my Momster theme for the month of May. You are a huge fan of Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
We're going to get into like the themes of the movie, and we can start out. Yesterday, we kind of started talking about this, and you mentioned that this is more of a giallo.
Yeah. If you're familiar with those types of Argento is probably, I guess, the most famous, not necessarily mainstream, but mainstream sort of giallo. Those hallmarks of that type of film, you see it at, at the 50th time you've watched it, after you've learned about some of the other ones, I guess.
Yeah, they're mysteries, and it's, the one thing that ties giallos all together is the perspective, like the first person perspective.
Yeah.
And you don't know who it is until the end. If you don't know who the killer is in Friday the 13th, then I don't know what to tell you. It's Pamela. It's the mom. So in the beginning of the film, the man driving the truck with Annie, she's hitchhiking, tells her that in 1957, a little boy drowned at the camp, and a year later, in 1958, the 2 camp counselors were murdered. A nickname the townspeople have for the camp is Camp Blood, which is so cute. Let's just open that back up, Camp Blood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He said, I remember, I think he's like, there was the kids getting killed. There was a fire. I can't remember exactly what he said the year was, because that one was like later. And then he said something in the water, and he's like, you gotta quit. Don't go to this job or whatever.
Yeah. She had sufficient warning, but she never even made it there. It was like, but I did find that interesting. It's like she just gets into this other, she was hitchhiking anyway, and this was the 80s, so people were not smart about that stuff. They got murdered all the time hitchhiking.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that scene where Annie's in the car and she jumps out, she realizes she's in danger. I definitely did not suspect it to be the mom at that point, because I wouldn't suspect a nice looking old lady being the driver, to be scared like that.
Right.
And then to literally jump out of a vehicle and run in the woods.
I think the music cues in that scene definitely kind of help build the suspense, because otherwise, you're just looking at somebody like, well, why is she? Oh, she just missed the turn. I'm gonna jump out of the car. What are you doing? It's like, now the music really builds that up to be, something sinister off screen that we can't see, but which we're gonna find out it's this kind of normal looking lady and not, sinister stuff is implied, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think the music is a huge tie-in to this.
Mhm.
Like the
I think the other cool thing about that scene too, I think they made that actor do their own stunt when they had to jump out of the car because it looks pretty bad. She looks, they cut, you can see a cut, but it's like she still hits the ground like pretty hard.
yeah,
But she rolled through it.
I mean, so that limp was probably pretty real.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the fucking 80s. You had to do your own shit. Like everything was like raw dogging it.
Right. This was the first movie in the series, so there wasn't near as much money behind it as all the other ones.
But I honestly, like, I miss that. Like the rawness of those shots are so much better than I think some of the stuff we get now with like CGI. It's like, I understand people don't want to get hurt.
Different mindset back then, and different way of doing things. There wasn't like, oh, we'll just fix it later. It's like, well, let's see what we can convince this person that's making, $100 a day if they want to. We the stunt guy we tried to hire isn't here, so let's see if they'll jump out of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they just fix it in post or whatever. We'll just green screen it real quick.
So the themes of Friday the 13th are deeply entangled with Pamela Voorhees' identity as a grieving mother, and her twisted sense of motherhood drives the film's horror at its core. Her loss and trauma don't just motivate her, they define the emotional backbone of the movie. You find out, I don't even know if she ever mentions his age, but Jason was 11 years old when he drowned at Camp Crystal Lake in the original film. It's funny because Friday the 13th, like the whole name of the movie, isn't really mentioned until the end of the movie.
Yeah, when she's confronting Annie, yeah.
Yeah. And I was reading, like I was reading about it and they were like, they came up with the name Friday the 13th. And then they went through the whole movie, I guess. And then at the end, they were like, well, we have to mention something for it to be Friday the 13th. Like, why would it be this name?
Right, I think it was just the producer chose as a project name or something. That'll be scary. And then yeah, they probably threw it in the script in there near the end, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, it's his birthday. So if you're ever celebrating Friday the 13th, if you didn't realize you are celebrating Jason Voorhees' birthday. Pamela Voorhees explicitly says in the first film that Jason was not a strong swimmer and that the counselors weren't watching him when he drowned, blaming them for his death. Yeah. If your kid's not a strong swimmer, why are you sending him to camp on a fucking lake?
I think, she worked there. Remember, she said she's the cook.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was saying she knows the family. She's like friends with the family.
He was tagging along.
Oh. It was obvious Pamela viewed Jason as vulnerable and in need of like constant care. He was born with a physical deformity, but we don't see that until like the dream-ish maybe sequence at the end.
Right. Yeah.
And he's got like a really fucked up bean-faced head.
Yeah.
It's almost like a kidney bean head. So he was likely a target for like bullying and things like that. It just seemed there's a certain amount of like overprotective mother's love that is just.
It makes her, gives her super strength, mutant powers, something.
Yeah. They never even mention a father.
Oh, right. Yeah, no.
Have you ever tried to look into the father?
Pitched in like one of the scripts, I think. I think it's part 5, which is when they don't have a Jason in it. But they never followed through with it.
Oh.
It was part of like an original script, and then it got all scrapped. Whatever. It was something about I think his father's name was supposed to be like Elias or something like that. And then they might have explored that in some of the graphic novels that came out.
Yeah, I was able to find that the comics have a tie-in with him, and his name was Elias, and sometimes he was portrayed as like a cruel, cold, or even abusive to Pamela and Jason because of his deformities.
Right. Yeah. It was more like weird Vincent Price horror sort of like family background story, and like, you know, at that point they're, you know, spirits are transporting through
Yeah.
different people because you're chewing on black hearts, and somebody's got to get stabbed with a mystical looking knife, and so, you know, they were doing different stuff at that point. But
Yeah.
I think I can't.
Getting
I think,
very creative.
but I think Elias was supposed to be part of that, and then it got scrapped. I don't know. It's like I said.
I mean, it would make sense if the dad was like this abusive asshole that, you know, it would make her even more protective of him.
Well, right. Mm-hmm. And I think that was supposed to be the gist of it, was that he, you know, he didn't want to have anything to do with Jason.
Yeah. Like we were kind of talking earlier about the kills, like you have to like disavow some of like logic.
Oh yeah.
For some of these kills with her.
Yeah. And see that now, since we're thinking about it, it's like I definitely saw a different one, a sequel first before I saw this one, because I do remember having to go like, oh well, it's not even Jason, it's like the mom or whatever, you know. So because that's how you get introduced to this, is the giant guy in the hockey mask and a machete. But you know, a little kid, you're really scared. But then the first one, go back, and it's just like, oh, he's not even in this one, and it's like, oh, it's the mom? Oh, you know, like, okay, what? Oh, a dream sequence, you know.
So you're a parent, and so I know you can relate to. Do you relate to Pamela at all? Like, do you feel like you would go on a killing spree for your boys?
Yeah, no, of course, because like, I mean, you know, we find out that, you know, Pamela, the counselors were making love while my son drowned or whatever. Yeah. You know, that's how she saw it, you know, but we don't really know if that's how it really happened. So
yeah, some parts that I was able to like dig up was like, it was like after hours, camp hours, and he should have been in his cabin, and he went out on his own, and that's when he drowned.
Oh, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is that really the camp counselor's fault? Because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. Like, he was putting himself in danger. And then, you know what's interesting about that is because there is this scene, it sounds like there's a kid by the lake saying like help or something.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the counselor goes out to go check on the kid, and she gets killed. But it's like, I don't know. It's just like, it's a weird sense of justice, because it's like, she did the right thing. She went to go check on the kid. You were pretending to be a kid drowning, and she went and did the right thing, and he still killed her.
Right. So it's, you know, there could be some holes in her logic as far as righteous justice goes. And a little more just, it's time to go on a kill crazy rampage, you know.
Yeah. And like, I could see as a mom, I can see killing the person responsible if there was a person responsible. I could definitely see myself losing it and having a psychotic break. But then to keep going back and killing everyone, like I couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, it'd be a lot of work as far as covering that up. So yeah. But I guess at that point, if that had been, what was it, the 50s, right? And he was 11, so it's going on 20-ish years later. Yeah, you probably should have just let that one go.
Yeah.
Knew who it was.
Yeah, right. Like, you already killed the ones it was. Like, just go. Well, I guess she was okay. So I will say, I think her logic was that she didn't want the camp to open up again.
Right. Yeah.
So she, at that point, it was like whatever she had to do to make sure it didn't open up. So she was going to go on a killing rampage.
Yeah, poisoning the water or setting fires, or just murdering everyone one by one, you know. Whichever comes first, I guess. Whatever she was up, you know, had time to do that day.
Right. As a mom, her love like never died. Pamela's influence lingers. In later films, Jason hears her voice or imagines her guiding him, showing that their bond, fueled by grief, fear, and protection, survived beyond the grave. For both of them, the relationship was never just mother and son. It was survival, identity, and obsession all wrapped into one.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, even, it's so creepy because you hear him, she talks to herself like she's him too. It's a creepy voice that she uses. I don't even know, it doesn't sound like a little boy. It just sounds creepy.
Yeah. at the end, once they do the reveal, it's Pamela that's been chasing everybody. But there's a couple of close-up shots of her at the end where she's doing the voice, and it's like, yeah, and killer mommy, and it's a real tight shot on the mouth. But you could tell though that the voice she's using here is not the same voice on the kill you were talking about earlier with Brenda, where it's get her to come out into the archery range or whatever by the lake.
Yeah.
Was it by the lake? Well, whatever. She tricks her to come out there and turns the lights on. You just hear but it's like the mommy and the help me, or not mommy, but the help me voice is like, it was different than the one she was using on the other shot. So it was. Again, it's more. Did they do that on purpose, or was that just the person that was available to shout in the distance that day while they were shooting? Maybe she wasn't on set that day or whatever.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was probably a convenience thing more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, like sometimes the voices that they use are very intentional.
Right.
Like for, I know with Psycho, when I was doing the research, the amount of people that they had record the mom part was like 4 different actresses.
Oh, really?
And then they picked for each part because the voice was different every time.
For each line. Oh, wow. Okay.
Not for each line, but each time the mom's dialogue would play.
Oh, okay.
And
for the scene. Okay.
It was just depending on who was the creepiest for that.
That's cool.
So it was a really creepy effect.
Yeah.
I can feel for Pamela in a way because being a mother, you don't have to wrap your identity around your child, and you should have an identity apart from them. But I mean, it was really just like her and him against the world. And like you had said earlier, like I didn't even realize, I knew she was like friends with the Christies, but I didn't realize she was the cook.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a lot more sense why he was there. Because I was thinking like, bitch, why'd you send your kid to a camp on water with low supervision when he's got all these issues and everything else? Like that just seems like a little bit neglectful on your part.
Yeah.
But it makes more sense that she's working there.
No, she was an employee, apparently.
It's crazy too, because it's almost like Psycho, where she just like absorbs his personality and gets this split personality.
Yeah.
Where she's still mothering Jason in her mind. He's still alive. Yeah. He's still there, and she's protecting him. It's really creepy.
Yeah.
When they make that reveal, I think that's creepier than all the kills. Like the kills are awesome.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the psychological like aspect that you see within this mom, this like break within her I think that's scarier.
And then it's like a combination of those elements that makes it, the here-going experience of the summer,
Yeah.
But well, I mean, yeah, it's not just the effects and stuff, but it's the psychological aspects and that you get from the actors and their dialogue and the script and all of that stuff, and then you got to shoot it a certain way and make sure it's lit a certain way, and we were talking about earlier, if you get the right the music is a big part of it, that plays a huge role, because otherwise you're just looking at people pretending to say stuff, and like without that music it can lose a lot of its impact. So
she never mentions God or anything. I don't think she's wearing a cross or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Her like moral compass is like very pious. Like these kids are having sex, they're going off, they're doing all these bad things. There's very much like a moral aspect to her kills. Like it's not just about her son. It's also about these kids are, sinful.
Right.
And they deserve to die.
Right. And that became like the joke / trope through all the rest of them, to the point like one where he goes to space on that. I think that's the last Jason that I watched actually. And like it got to the point where like in that one he's like, for some ridiculous premise, he's frozen and in space and in the future now. But, like, because there some scientists discovered him. Of course, there's like college kids in the group, and as soon as they start fucking around or whatever, that's when he starts to wake up. And then it's to the point, they shoot it where the two kids start having sex, and then that's what this whole time his like hand's been flicking and is twitching, and then as soon as they start having sex, he like sits up like immediately, and it's like at that point it's such a corny joke, you know.
Yeah.
But even back then, when it was just a independent movie and not a cultural mainstay franchise or whatever,
Yeah.
people were drawing those parallels of like, oh, every time these kids start having sex or smoking weed or whatever, that's they have to get killed. And like you said, and it's like, I feel when you said Pamela didn't have a cross, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. And it's like, isn't somebody else wearing a cross though at some point? I can't. And that's shit. Now I gotta go back and look for it. But no, even back then for this movie, that concept was brought up, and it just became the trope of the series, like the further it went,
Yeah, like I think Halloween kind of did that first when it came to the kills.
Right. Yeah.
And then this one came after Halloween, and I mean I think it's pretty well known that they kind of ripped off Halloween, right?
Oh yeah, no, Sean Cunningham admits it, so
yeah, it's well known. Yeah. So
and the same thing with the ending was like they're like, oh well, we saw Carrie, like it had just come out not that long ago, so we needed a chair jumper ending or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even compare those two, Carrie and the lake scene. That is, yeah.
Oh, the movie's over. No, nice music. Oh, I got you.
Yeah, and I did Carrie in April. I did Carrie. Yeah, and I would definitely say that this mom is very similar to Norman Bates in Psycho. The way that she has that inner dialogue with her son, it's just like opposite. But I think Norman Bates is very similar.
And we're talking about Pamela now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I thought you were talking about Carrie's mom, and I was like, oh,
no,
that's a different kind of crazy.
No.
I got you. Yeah. Is she Norma?
Yeah, Norma, and then Norman.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say Norma and Pamela. Yeah. They're kind of similar, yeah.
Except in Psycho, it's the mom who is murdered by the son, and then he kind of like absorbs her into his psyche. There's definitely a denial with Pamela. She never accepts Jason's death. She talks about him and hears him, and she kills in his name, but this denial of death keeps her locked in like the past, unable to grieve in a healthy way. Her murders are rituals of preservation for him. It's almost like it's always on his birthday, right? So Friday the 13th, that's when she's going to go and she's going to kill everyone. She's going to set the shit on fire. She's going to poison the water, whatever it is, that's her ritual. It's always going to be at that time. Each one allowing her, so each time she does this, it allows her to stay in a world where Jason still needs her. So she's going to come to his rescue every year on that day.
But did they ever? Is it laid out that way that it's always she comes back always on Friday the 13th on his birthday?
So it's not as explicit, but she does say it's my boy's birthday. It's Friday the 13th, and you know that she's coming back every year.
Right. Okay.
So the fact that she came back on his birthday, it's insinuated.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's definitely, we've already established that it is a ritual for her, or it's like a pattern because she's come back several times to fuck shit up.
Right, and this is just the one she mentions. Yeah, so that's true.
Oh, you know what threw me off? When that first scene, when you finally get a shot of her, you finally see her, and she's acting so nice to Alice. And she's just like, oh, I'm an old friend of the Christies. How can I help you? Mm-hmm. Don't worry. It's okay. Just show me. It's fine. You'll be fine. And she almost seems like a reassuring, caring mom. She's in this knitted sweater. She's got her little bob, her little short haircut. Mm-hmm. She's obviously in her 50s.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
At least. Uh-huh. And nothing about her says serial killer. It says I'm going to make you a pie.
Right. Yeah.
Not a murder pie, but a regular pie with apples that Jana would make us, because Jana makes great pie. Oh, yeah. What did you think about that scene when she's first reassuring Alice?
Oh, well, with hindsight and seeing it like a million zillion times at this point, it's I'm sure a deliberate thing to be like, here's this person. There's no way it could be this isn't the killer. Obviously, I mean, come on, look at this lady. But the Alice is meanwhile panicking that her love interest friend is stabbed through the face, like into the door off a few feet off of the ground. So obviously, this woman who just drove up from a completely different direction when this kill was perpetrated at least, I don't know, 2 minutes ago at the most. And she just drives in from a different direction. It obviously, if she looks like she's going to make pies and help you, not that she obviously isn't the killer.
Yeah, there's no blood on her.
There's no blood, nothing. She's like her hair isn't messed up or like anything. She's completely relaxed.
Yeah,
but very deliberate. They don't, they're trying to throw the viewer off the scent. But yeah, I just as a kid, it's just like that's not Jason. Jason's not even in this one. It's the mom. Like, oh, okay, that's weird or whatever. Like
yeah,
the whole idea of again, it's like a Giallo-esque sort of script device or whatever to just definitely not. There's no way it could be this person and it's that person.
Yeah, and then she kind of like their fight scene is super intense.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
It's a really great fight scene, and I'm like rooting for Alice the whole time. But then there are some times where I was like, it makes you nervous. I'm like, fuck, she's got the upper hand right now. Why does this old woman have the upper hand?
In the book that I brought, they talk about it a little bit, and I think it's even on the documentary. The actress that plays Pamela, she's she was a stage actor, very very veteran. Had been doing it forever, and like stage actors when they fight, there's physical contact, when they're fighting. If the script says to slap Alice, Alice is gonna get slapped, and Alice is just a kid actor. This is like one of her first gigs, and she slapped the shit out of her. It was like it's just like stopped and like looked at the director, and the director had to be like, "Oh no, wait, no, you can't do that."
Oh my God, I didn't realize that. That's so funny.
So like they had to get over that first before they could shoot the rest of the stuff, because she's just ready to like do her thing.
That's funny though. I didn't realize. I mean, it definitely looks like they're really fighting.
Oh yeah. They're rolling around by the canoe, and there's slapping her around a little bit and like pushing her head into the sand and stuff. And then they cut it. It's you could see it when Alice swings the frying pan at her. It's very she's pulling her swing, and they cut it and she falls down and all that. Whereas when Pamela, it's like I said, it's one shot. It's her like smashing her head into the ground and being real rough with her and stuff. It's good.
Poor Alice, she really got roughed up. Yeah, I thought the frying pan was gonna kill her for sure at first, and then she fucking comes back.
No, that's another thing. It's like there's no way that lady's gonna up after a headshot with a frying pan. No.
But she does. Yeah. She comes back, and there was like blood coming out of her head too with the frying pan, right? Yeah. Whenever they like get, so I was like, she definitely had her head cracked open. Like, how is she gonna get up from that?
Cost. Your son getting murdered can give you, mutant powers, superhuman.
Yeah.
Mutant powers, I guess.
And then Alice eventually chops her head off, which is such a great scene too. Okay, Alice.
That's one I remember seeing the first time as a kid, and seeing it and going like, okay, wait, but the machete hits the head at the neck at this angle, but it was already split on this side, and it comes off like, because they just do the shot, but they've got a prop head and they hit it.
Yeah,
it comes off the toothpicks or whatever. But like,
yeah,
it's like even as a kid seeing it, it's like if the machete hit them at this side, it wouldn't be split open on the other side,
Yeah.
Watching it and like rewinding the VHS tape, trying to watch
small details.
Slow motion. and then the other thing that's funny too about that shot, that's a famous thing they always talk about, is there's the initial shot. It's real quick. The head comes off of the mount, and then the next shot is flashes back to Alice for a second, and then it comes back, and there's some blood squirting, and you see hands in the frame. And the hands are like, it's obviously, these are a man's hands. They have hairy knuckles. This is not the same woman we just saw. before. And everyone always points that out. It's funny.
There are quite a few inconsistencies in this, and I think it adds to the charm of it. Like, it's lucky that it was made in the 1980s and this was the first of the series, because
yeah, it's still like Tom Savini magic anyway. So you wouldn't want to go back and like George Lucas those shots now and take out the hairy knuckles or whatever.
No, absolutely not. That would destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So they mentioned that Jason's body, they never found a body in the lake.
Right.
That's a key mystery fueling the mythology behind the Friday the 13th franchise.
Yeah.
What is your theory on that?
With the benefit of hindsight and having indulged in all of the extra content surrounded each of these particular movies in the series, none of where it went was ever planned to begin with. This was just a movie that they were making, and it just had particular plot devices, and there was no like, well, what if we make another? We better write it a certain way so that in case we have a future movie. It was at the time when they did it, by the end of the movie, you could surmise that Pamela made the whole thing up anyway, and because, like you said, they never found a body.
Yeah.
So is that even a real thing that she was talking about?
Yeah. She could be just a schizophrenic, crazy bitch.
Sure. And now that this traumatized person has the chance to become this fucking paranoid, crazy bitch or whatever, maybe she'll go on to kill crazy Rampage now because there's that boy in the lake, that's telling her to do things or whatever, So at the time when they wrote it, there wasn't any more thought put into it than what was put into it, what you immediately just saw on the screen. I'm sure they wanted, like most artists, they want people to come to their own conclusions and their own interpretations of it and not have just everything directly spelled out for you. And this movie, cliche-ish now or tropey as everyone tries to say that it is, and the sign of the times. It's like, no, there was room for some thought. It wasn't. Yeah,
no, there was.
Kids have sex, stab, stab, stab. It wasn't.
Yeah, I think there's more to it than people give it credit for. I will say, like, I rewatched this movie a few days ago with Angie and Destin. And when Alice gets into the canoe in the middle of the night and just goes into the middle of the lake, they're like, why would she do that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, she was traumatized,
I mean, but that's the scariest place to be. In the middle of a lake at night, you can't see anything out there. Right. That is worse. No flash. She could have left. There was a vehicle. There was so many things. You're going to go in the middle of the lake.
She could have been concussed, She just went through a pretty vicious beating.
Yeah, so, yeah.
You're not making the right decisions necessarily at that point.
What state was this in?
New Jersey.
Okay, so they don't have alligators there.
Well, I don't know about that.
I mean, in Florida, you don't do that shit. You don't just go in a canoe in the middle of the water at night with all the alligators and things that we have that will kill you. No.
The mosquitoes would be enough to keep me away from doing that, let alone the alligators.
Yeah.
They shot it in New Jersey, and then I think eventually that it became part of the story that it was Camp Crystal Lake was always in New Jersey, I think. But,
okay. I believe you. Mm-hmm. And there is a part of it where I think a lot of people are disappointed with the fact that Jason's not actually in this one.
Yeah.
Because people usually don't start with this one.
Right.
And so they'll avoid it because they're like, well, Jason's not even in it. Mm-hmm. So why am I going to watch that? But honestly, I think it's a really strong movie starting this franchise off.
Oh, yeah. It's cool. For this particular one, the main, the icon of the series doesn't even show up until like a popularized version that him as. Doesn't even come in until the third one, and that was on that was kind of a fluke that he even put the hockey mask on anyway. So then you have these other two movies that precede that one to kind of delve into and learn some more lore and just learning about films and how they're made and shit, and how it's just like, see, there's not always continuity between every movie as far as even who the killer is, and that, let alone like what did they look like that time and who was the actor that played them or whatever. It's like, no, it's the movie business. they hire whoever they can get, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's the same.
You make do.
Yeah, right. They're making do with what they can get at the time and stuff. So
Yeah.
You'll notice some differences in the plot between the first movie and then the other sequels. Where this one is interesting because it's just different going backwards and starting from the beginning.
I think the biggest star that came out of this was Kevin Bacon.
Right, yeah, to kind of keep going, yes.
Yeah, Betsy Palmer was.
Damn it, I couldn't think of it.
Was Pamela Voorhees,
Yes.
and she only took this role because she needed a new car.
Yeah, I remember that story too. Yeah. I read the script and I'm like, what is this shit? It's really fun. Her enemies are great. It's worth watching. She's really funny.
Yeah, she seems like a really funny person.
So it was work. Yeah.
Yeah, what she says, she called the movie a piece of shit. So many of these horror movies start out like that, though. Like, people look at it and they're like, what the fuck is this? All right, fine, it's a job. And then it ends up being something huge.
Actors look down on horror stuff, even back then in like the 80s. So just your experience, right? Because that lady, she at that point in her career, she had been in, I'm sure, like hundreds of things. So this was just another, whatever. I need a new car.
Yeah.
All right, agent. I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for being a guest. I'm glad that I finally got you on.
Yeah.
So many episodes in, I'm like, this is probably going to be like episode 29 or 30, maybe 31.
Am I still, if we do Halloween, do I get the Halloween gig too?
You still get Halloween. Yes, you get Halloween. I am going to do Halloween during Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get there.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Of course. Now it's time for the true horrors of it all. Victor Miller was hired by director-producer Sean Cunningham to write a horror movie that could capitalize on the success of Halloween. The task? Create a shocking slasher that could pull audiences in with a terrifying twist. So Miller's key influences were Halloween's popularity. Miller admired how Halloween used suspense and a mysterious killer to build dread. He wanted Friday the 13th to be a similar tone, but be more brutal and gory. With the twist ending, Miller loved twist endings and wanted to deliver something unexpected. That's why Jason isn't the killer in the original. His mother, Pamela Voorhees, is. For the parent-child trauma, Pamela Voorhees' motivation, avenging her drowning son, Jason, was Miller's way of exploring motherhood twisted by grief. He's even said he modeled her on a female Norman Bates, which totally makes sense. And before I found that information out, I discuss it in like the horror talk portion, and I kind of made those connections. Proud of myself. He says, I took motherhood and turned it on its head. The killer was a mother, doing it for her son, who couldn't speak for himself. When it came to Sean Cunningham, the camp setting was chosen not just for its eerie isolation, but because it played on familiar childhood nostalgia turned sinister. Everyone knows summer camp. Cunningham turned it into a killing ground. We've got some really creepy factors that helped create this lore around the camp. So we've got an isolated location, teens away from authority, bonfires, sex sneaking off in the woods, and it makes the perfect slasher setup. When making Friday the 13th, Jason wasn't the plan. Originally, Jason wasn't meant to be a killer or a franchise. Cunningham saw him as a tragic child victim, and the real monster was Pamela Voorhees. The twist of a killer mother was more of a Victor Miller's influence. Cunningham even disliked the supernatural Jason that emerges in later sequels. He says, Jason was dead. He was a victim, not a villain. I never intended for him to come back. So while Friday the 13th is influenced by a few different horror movies, so we mentioned Halloween, I haven't mentioned it, but Neil, my guest, he mentions Carrie with the final jump scare, which totally makes sense. And then we've got Norman Bates, we've got Psycho with the mom talking to herself in the son's voice. So those are all obvious influences in this movie, but there is a real case that kind of mimics this scenario. Kids have ended up dead at camp. And, you know, there's the stereotype of sitting around a campfire and telling ghost stories for a reason. So here is a true horror story that could be called the real Friday the 13th. It's the Lake Bodom murders in 1960 Finland. On June 5, 1960, 4 teenagers were camping at Lake Bodom in Espoo, Finland. In the early hours, an unknown assailant brutally attacked them while they were asleep in their tent. 3 were killed, stabbed, and bludgeoned to death. The 4th, Nils Gustafsson, I hope I said that right. I'm pretty sure I totally butchered that. Survived with serious injuries. So some things that make this really similar to Friday the 13th is a quiet lakeside campsite in the woods. These victims were young teens sleeping in tents, just echoing that vulnerability of campers in Friday the 13th. And then the brutality of the killings. The killer attacked with a knife and a blunt object, much like Jason Voorhees' chaotic murder style. This is an unsolved mystery. The killer was never conclusively identified, so the survivor, Gustafsson, was even charged in 2004, 44 years later, but was acquitted. The case remained one of Finland's most notorious unsolved murders. It appeared that the kids had been stalked. The tent was slashed from the outside, suggesting the killer stalked them silently in the dark before the attack. Their belongings were stolen, and the killer vanished without leaving clear evidence. I'm sure nowadays, this was in the 1960s, so I'm sure now we would be able to identify this person, or at least I hope so. But this is a very sad story, these poor teenagers. Let's end on a high note. Right now, I am actually on vacation and I am pre-recording this episode so that I have something out. So I am taking my daughter on a graduation trip. We are doing a little mother-daughter trip, and then my older sister Monique and my niece is also joining us. So it's going to be a really fun time. I planned this thing out so detailed, like my episodes. You can only imagine the amount of details I put into this. It's kind of intense. I apologize to my sister and my niece in advance. My daughter's used to me, so she's just along for the ride, but I am not leaving a crumb behind when it comes to London and Paris. We are doing as much as we can in the 11 days that we are gone. We're doing a lot of the historical and educational spots, so I'm very excited. I'm definitely going to be putting a lot of things about Jack the Ripper. I'm going to go to the Jack the Ripper Museum. I'm going to be in Bath in the UK. So actually, Mary Shelley lived in Bath, and there is a Frankenstein museum. So I'm going to go there and I'll make some videos from there. I'm very excited about that. There's just like a rich history of true crime in these cities, like any city. Definitely going to go to some catacombs, all the things. So just, even though I am traveling, I'm going to be true crime and horror all the time. I don't turn it off. It's just part of me at this point in my life. If you have a movie suggestion that could fit into my category of the month, I will watch those movies and give you a rating with my Scream scale. You can email me at screamqueenpodcaster@gmail.com and I will shout you out for participating and supporting the podcast. This is a weekly podcast with new episodes out every Thursday. All the research, writing, and audio is done by yours truly. This is a one-woman show and I'm doing my very best. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. It really means a lot, really. You can find me on Instagram at Scream Queen Podcaster, Blue Sky at Scream Queen Podcast, TikTok at Scream Queen Podcast, and there is a link tree that will take you to my YouTube and Facebook page as well. Remember, no one will ever love you like your mom loves you. Until next time, goodbye.